going to ask the Lord for His Word so that we can share this moment of reflection on New Age. And I'm going to read from John 19:31. The pierced Christ. As it was preparation day, the Jews did not want the bodies to remain on the cross during the Sabbath, for this Sabbath was a very solemn day. They asked Pilate to have the legs of the condemned men broken, so they might take away the bodies. The soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who had been crucified with Jesus. When they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they did not break his legs. One of the soldiers, however, pierced his side with a lance, and immediately there came out blood and water. The one who has seen here gives his witness so that you may believe. His witness is true, and he knows that he speaks the truth. All this happened to fulfill the words of Scripture. No one of his bones shall be broken. Another text says, they shall look on him whom they have pierced. The word of the Lord. The theme of New Age is probably one of the most unknown ones by the church, unfortunately. And it's not because the church doesn't know, it's just that it is like the pace of a battle that we have to always work to catch up with it. The devil is too busy. And you know, when you read the scriptures, you read, the children of the dark are more astute than the children of the light. See, and that shows you what it means. It means they are so astute, they always coming up with new games. You know, it's like the police. The police can never the police can never catch up with criminals. They are always inventing a new crime, a new way to, and then they have to constantly be building up a new operation, new tactics to catch up with criminals. And same thing happens in the spiritual world with the spiritual battle. The church is constantly guarding the souls and watching the devil, and the devil is constantly building up new strategies, new ways of destroying souls. So this is a never-ending battle. So at the end, we could never say the church doesn't know. It's just that the church is an army, and we're fighting against an enemy that is feisty, astute, and is constantly working against us. So we are in a battle. And New Age is about the kingdom of the dark. That's what New Age is. There's nothing new about New Age. I don't even know why they call it New Age, but I'm sure there is a reason. But the thing is, New Age begins with the falling of original sin. That's the beginning of New Age. And it's called an age because it has an end. It's like the new creation in Jesus Christ has no end. And so when we part the two between New Age and the new creation, then we see our journey and our battle. New Age begins with original sin. The devil will always, till Jesus comes back and his power will be crushed forever, will always come up with a new way of conquering souls and strategies. And through every cycle of humanity, he will come up with something new of the old. You know, it's the old game dressed up in a new fashion. So he dresses up with the culture. He dresses up with what is going on in the present. He's always working on time, and sometimes even ahead of time. And so he permeates the cultures in a way that we think that it is people doing this. Because, you know, when I was a teenager in the 60s, I grew up in a province, in the countryside. And we were all Catholics, and it was very simple life. There were things that were dramatic, like there was an area of town where there was prostitutes, you know, there was things like that were very strange, but they were there. During Holy Week, you could see everyone on their knees. Even the prostitutes were bleeding on their knees. But on Monday, after the resurrection, they were all back to their prostíbulos, you know, back to their prostitution areas. Like like that, and it was very strange, but this is the way it was. But I grew up in a very Catholic environment with very basic principles of life, and it was a good living, a good upbringing. But when I went to the big city of Bogota, and I was just early in my teens, like 14 years old, the world just enchanted me, and everything that was there, and all these propositions of the dark, like all these pagan philosophies and the astrologies and numerologies and all these mental control techniques and all these alternatives were there. And then at the end, Jesus became one more figure of all these incredible propositions, and so the whole Christianity was diluted and became syncretized, as they call it. And I became syncretized. And that is a good example of what New Age is about. New Age is about picking up from everywhere things conveniently for your own benefit and then turning all of that into one thing. It's like syncretizing. It's like when I was a teenager, I was part Hinduist, part Buddhist, part magician, part witchcraft, part numerologist, part astrologer, and part of everything, a little bit of everything. And this complete liberalization of the sexes and things like that came along. All of that is part of New Age. The movement of homosexuality and lesbians and all of that is New Age, because this is what it does. It brings people into their own, and then brings people into this God-like type of life. Like it shows you that you are able to do whatever you want on your own. Example, the three biggest steps of the worldly philosophy of today are positive thinking, self-esteem, and self-realization. Those are great evils, and they are so common, even in the church. Some Christian psychology deals with that as a tool, when it is not a tool. It is a New Age force. Why? Think about this. You could never say you will have self-esteem. We do need esteem, but how could it be self when God says to Moses, I am the one who is, the only one who is. So if I am not, because there is only one God and there is only one who is, that means I am not. How could I have self-esteem? My esteem has to be Christ's esteem, not self-esteem. And it's so subliminal, it shows you like it's it's absolutely perfect psychologically speaking, humanly speaking, to say self-esteem. You think, the esteem has to come out of me. I have to be the one working on having a strong esteem, in myself. But it's not true. Your esteem has to be Christ. You have to have Christ esteem as opposed to self-esteem. Because you could never pretend that on your own you're going to have esteem on your own, when not even the leaf of a tree moves without the will of God. See, how could you have self-esteem? It denies the presence of God in your life completely. Positive thinking. They tell you that if you think positively, you are able to get what you want. Even if you fix up your goals in the future as if they are already being conceived, then you will achieve them. That's what they tell you. That's mental control, right? And then where is grace left when everything we do get in life is grace? It's not simply positive thinking. We have to have a positive attitude. That we should have. That means it's a virtue called hope. We should have hope. And we should have that confidence in God that builds us up into hope. And that is a positive attitude. But positive thinking will be turning yourself into God and pretending by thinking positively you are able to get what you want on your own, through your own thoughts and through your own attitude and through your own mind. So that is completely idolatry. There's nothing to do, it has no relationship with God. And the other part is self-realization. Why do Christians fall into Eastern philosophies and like Buddhism and Hinduism? And they claim that self-realization is one of the main centers of their teachings. Self-realization. There is nothing to realize about self. See, if you get really deep into yourself, you're going to end up finding out that you are clay. And then that's all you're going to get. See, you're going to end up in clay because we are clay. But if you realize that what we have to really do is to realize God in us, then it's not about self-realization. It's about realizing God in our lives. It's completely the opposite, which means die to self instead of self-realization. Self-realization is the opposite of dying to self. So how could you describe self-realization best? Pride. That's what self-realization is about. You know, the existentialists, they look for the philosophical stone, and they are all searching for it because they think they're going to find that philosophical stone that is going to give them all the answers. And they try to find it through reason. And that's what self-realization is all about, looking for that. And we are looking for Christ. That's who we look for. This is our realization, Christ. So Jesus says, the Jews are looking for signs and the Hebrews for wisdom, but we are looking for a crucified Christ. And this is what we have to have very clear in us. So New Age is about bringing you into a position where you are adoring creation as opposed to adoring Creator. And it's very shrewd, it's very smart. You know, it's like if you read all these philosophies of New Age, they are precious, beautiful. They are just adoring the elements of nature, creation. And they display the most incredible poetry, the most incredible philosophy, just to enchant all these incredible creation powers and beauty. And it's all real because who couldn't say that it's beautiful? I mean, it's wonderful, but it's not about adoring and worshiping creation, because that's what pagans do. And then they bring you into this paganry, and they bring you into this self-conception of life by you observing creation and adoring it. And then at the end, what you do is you find that on your own you can conceive everything that is created, and you are supposed to be a creator. You see, one of the reasons why the devil is a devil is because he refused to be a creature in obedience to God. And then he told Eve, you will be like God. That's what he told her. See, the original sin is all about that. That's why it's New Age. It's that you will be like God if you eat of this fruit. And that's the teaching of New Age. We are gods. And then once you start like that, you see the people in the world today. See, all the heroes in the world are human beings. You know, the sportsmen, the actors, the musicians, the wealthy ones, the politicians. Those are the heroes of today. Big heroes. And they are built up like gods. But it's amazing that those gods are all mortal gods, and they all, go into a procession to the cemetery. None of them come out of there. See, I always tell people, you know who my hero is? My hero is the one that was able to go right into the tomb and came out of there. Say, none of these heroes of today enchant me and impress me. All of them go to the tomb. No one comes out. So I go with the one that came out. His name is Jesus. That's the only t-shirt I wear. I only have the flag. My hero, the one that came out of there. So the rest is just foolish, and it's a fantasy. It's a temporary state, and it's going to change, and it's going to come to pass. So I'm not involved with that. And New Age is all involved about temporary triumph, the temporary glories, the glories of this world. And you worship that. That's why within New Age we have the worshiping of crystals that is called Feng Shui, originally from Japan. Say, we have Reiki, which is supposed to be a therapy, see, but it's mediumship, it's a spiritualism. The Reiki masters, they all have degrees, and those degrees are not different than the degrees of Masons. They just have degrees of a spirituality of the dark. So the greater degrees of the Reiki master, the more healing they bring to you. It's like a spiritual massage. And what they do, they channel spirits and they lay hands on you, and then you are healed from physical ailments. And you are actually healed. But what happens is, if you place yourselves in the hands of a Reiki master with a physical ailment, you will be healed, but you will have opened the doors to the spirits. So they don't mind healing your body as long as they can take your soul. And that's why people are so naive. They think that all these alternative medicines make sense because they heal you faster. You see, and it's so strange. You know, Father Gabriel Amor, as you know, probably he's an old Vatican exorcist, and is an authority in demonology and great experiences. He had a patient that had great trouble with spirits, and he was so puzzled because 2 years he couldn't find the source of the problem. 2 years, and the patient was getting worse and worse all the time. It was a woman, originally from Germany. And then one day in prayer, he felt he had to ask her about medication and medical treatment, because he couldn't find any other area in her life where she could have been involved or tap into some kind of darkness by any practice or anything. And then he asked her, "Are you taking any medication?" And she said, "Yes, I've been taking for 20 years medication, homeopathic medication." And then he said, "Oh, okay. Why don't you bring me some of that?" And then she brought in a few of the homeopathic things that she was taking. And then Father Amor brought in the same medication on natural medicine. You see, same herbs, but not homeopathic. Let's say, for example, one of the herbs were valerian herbs. And then he found valerian herbs produced by a company that was just plain commercial herb producer, right? Distributor. And then he put the two of them together and did a prayer, an exorcism prayer, and went to sleep and left them in his library there at home. When he came out the next morning, the medication that was natural, produced commercially, was destroyed. It was all like powder, and the other one was intact, the homeopathic. And then the next day he did the opposite. He put a Saint Benedict crucifix in between the two, and then he did another prayer, very strong prayer. And the next day when he woke up and went to see, the homeopathic medicine was powder and the other one was intact. Then he knew there was a spirit in the medicine. A spirit. And that's why, being the same herb, the homeopathic was more effective. And he said, there is something fishy here. How could that be when both herbs are the same? See, why homeopathic will be more powerful and more effective than this one? When it's exactly the same doses, everything the same. So there was something fishy about it. So he found out that this doctor in Germany that invented homeopathy, he was an alchemist. So a medical magician, right? So what he did, he put arcanes on the herbs. Arcanes is a spiritual treaty. It's like a covenant that you make with the spirits with every particular herb. And then after that, anything that carries the name of homeopathic, even if they put together the herbs, wherever they put them together, the spirit would travel with the herbs. And an example I give you in the opposite side. When you have your scapula, right? The scapula. They only have to put it on you and consecrate you once in your life, right? And then after that, if the scapula breaks down, you just get another one. You don't even need to get it blessed. because it's already imposed on you. See? And you can get another scapular, put it on, and it has the consecration of the first one. Same thing in the opposite direction. He put arcanes on the herbs, so they are consecrated. So as long as they travel through the homeopathy, then they all have the spirit he placed on them. See? And then some homeopathic doctors all around the world, not all of them are aware, they're dealing with the spirits with what they are diagnosing their patients. So the only thing they know is that they are much more effective than the regular natural or naturist medicine, right? And then this is something incredible. When he discovered that, he was able to exorcise this woman. And then he got her to bring in all the names of every medication of homeopathy she took all these years. She was not able to bring them all in, but she brought in enough for her to be exorcised. And then he began to call every spirit by name, calling the herb, but adding the name homeopathy. He had to add the name. See? And then he was calling one by one. He spoke to 7 different spirits. And then they gave him information. See, all kinds of information. That's why the Vatican has a document on homeopathy and says, do not touch it. See, what happens with that is you will open a door. You will open a door with that. You will be healed physically, and then you have an entrance, a gate where the spirits can come in. And that's what they love. You see, you tell this to people, they get so angry because a lot of people have been benefited from that, and especially those doctors that are practicing that. I have letters threatening me. In Mexico, I was accused to the cardinal in the city of Mexico, but I have the documents. You see, that's what makes a big difference. It's not me talking. The Vatican was the one that came out with that, and a very respected exorcist. He's not just some experimental, demonologist. He was a very serious demonologist, and that's a little example of what alternative medicine is all about, And another thing, disease not always is a consequence of sin. You can see that in the scriptures when they were asking about this blind man, and they said, is he blind because of the sins of his ancestors or his own sins? And then Jesus said, none of them. He is blind because God is going to glorify himself in him. And then he was born blind so that Jesus will find him one day and give him his eyesight back, and God will be glorified in that. It's like Lazarus died so that Jesus could resurrect him. He didn't die. That disease was not a consequence of anything else but God's glory. But there are diseases that are part and consequence of sin. You notice that in the paralytic of Bethesda, in the pool of Bethesda. This guy was paralyzed for I don't know how many years, and Jesus healed him. But when Jesus found him in the temple after he had healed him, he told him, your sins have been forgiven. Go and do not sin anymore, or worse things will happen to you. So he showed him that disease was a consequence of his sins. And so now, let's say God wants to save a family, and then he allows the mother to contract cancer, and then the mother is diagnosed with cancer. That's supposed to bring the whole family around the mother and back to God. That's the meaning. That's why God is allowing that in that particular case. So one of the children is into New Age. Then the doctors tell the family, there is no hope. We're going to do whatever we can, but your mother probably is going to last 3 more months. That's all her life. That's all she's got left. Then one of the sons said, I refuse. I know we can heal her. We can take her to this man. He is good. He has healed a lot of people. And they take her to the magician, to the spiritualist, to a healer. And then they go to the healer, and the healer heals the mother. So what happened there? The devil healed the mother, but then the whole family lost the chance for salvation. Because that mother and that disease of the mother was the calling of grace for all of the family. Even if the mother had died. Doesn't matter, because it was about the souls. So the devil comes in and heals the physical part of the mother and hurts the spiritual side of everybody in the family. See? And then the worst thing of all is that in the future, everyone that is sick in the family, where are they going to take them? They're going to take them to a magician. See, so it is like a baptism to the darkness, and this is the way New Age moves on. See, there are things like this. You probably heard about the Ouija board. The Ouija board, right? It's a spiritualism, and it's like a game. You find it in every game store, toy store for children. They sell it there, and a lot of children play with it. Some years ago, in California, I was approached by an old priest, and he came to one of my talks, and he says, I am very interested in your experience with demons, and I want you to come with me to an apostolate I have in mental clinics, mental hospitals, with mental patients. He says, I have a ministry where I go and try to find patients that are diagnosed with schizophrenia, and especially those that have multiple personalities. They have many voices talking to them. So I'm very interested in them, because most of them are just spiritual. They are not a mental case. And then he said he had exorcised many and healed many through prayer. And then I joined him. And we, within a year and a half, like 18 months, I was able to go with him about 5 times every time I went to California. And we went to hospitals, and he would call these patients, and then those patients that were diagnosed as schizophrenic, they will all share that they're hearing voices. The voices are telling them really terrible things to do and whatever. So it was very similar most every case. And then we will talk to them, and he found out that 90% of those cases were persons that play with the Ouija board when they were children. See, what happens is you play with the Ouija board, and you don't make much of it, because it does scare you, because it does move, and it does answer what you ask. So people don't realize there are spirits talking to you, and you already opened the door to them. See, spirits are outside time and space. So our life is an instant in eternity. It's nothing, our life, to them, because they are not confined to time and space. So they come in when you are 10 years old or 12 to the Ouija board, and they wait 20 years, for example. And then when you turn 30, 32, all of a sudden you end up with voices in your head. They don't let you sleep. You feel presences everywhere. All kinds of strange things are happening to you. And then they bring you to the doctor, to the psychiatrist. They can't find any source of that. They bring them to a priest. They cannot find any source of that. And so they give up on them. They end up confined to a mental institution because they become violent. The spirits are talking to them, telling them to do horrible things. Some of them get to do horrible things, to kill people or to do things like that. And so they end up diagnosed as schizophrenic, and the government takes control of them. They are not allowed to be in society any longer. They are considered a danger to society. So the spirits will wait all those years to show up. See, some people are engaged with them so late in life that it could be 50 years later. That's how difficult it is, And then that's an example of what is tapping with the darkness, opening doors. Let's say you were 9 years old and you were walking with some friends through a park, and a gypsy woman came in and offered to read your hand. And then you open up your hand like this, and she read your hand. So what happened is you opened the door of your heart for spirits to look in, and therefore that door is still open unless the church close it down, but it will be open all of your life. They are able to come in through there, and then they work through that door that you open. That's why every action we have engaged with that has to do with divination, with numerologies, with mental control techniques, with any kind of alternative medicine that we are not aware of exactly of the source, All of that are doors open into the darkness. And then they are doors open which are coordinates for a spirit to land in there. I was talking about the wounds in the talk before. Wounds. And I'm talking about wounds being like a satellite for a spirit. But there are two ways of dealing with wounds. One, your wounds could be the source of purification and sanctification in your life. Because if you turn them into God and ask God for mercy and compassion, those wounds can sanctify you. Because you are bleeding and they are painful and they hurt, but you accept that as a cross in your life. You give it to God and say, Lord, I give you my wounds. I consecrate them to you. And please do not let these wounds be an instrument of evil. Do not let them bleed to hurt anybody. Please sanctify me with these wounds. So this is the healing wound. Those are the wounds that are turned into God. And then the wounds of corruption, are the wounds that are hurting and producing resentment. Those wounds that you do not accept and you are angry with them and you don't want to deal with them and you are completely disrupted with those wounds, and every time they bleed you are angry. You don't want them in your life, you don't want to accept them, and you don't know how to deal with them. You just go mad with them. That's the way you can corrupt yourself with your own wounds, and they turn into wounds of evil. A lot of people are murderers. A lot of people are prostitutes, a lot of people are drug addicts, a lot of people are really bad individuals doing bad things because of their wounds that corrupted them. And they go against themselves and against everybody and against God because of the wounds. So those wounds are corrupting people. But the same wounds could sanctify you, could glorify God from the wounds. You know, St. Paul gives us an incredible example about weaknesses. And he asked God 3 times to take a thorn of his flesh off of him. And God didn't heal him. God told him, my grace suffices you. I glorify myself in your weakness. And then what was the answer? Sometimes we are carrying a wound so deep, St. Paul called his as a demon that came straight from hell that Satan sent to torment him. That's the way he described the thorn in his flesh. He didn't describe what it was, but it was a thorn in his flesh, something, a weakness. And then it shows us that sometimes God allows that weakness to stay with us and not to be healed in order to purify us, to sanctify us. If St. Paul would have been a perfect apostle, he wouldn't have had any compassion with anyone. He would have been too perfect. And then God kept him humble, kept him bleeding. And that way he will also feel for the others. And that's what he does with us sometimes, When we are bleeding towards God and the wounds are focused on God and we offer them to God, then we have compassion of the wounds of our neighbor because we know how it hurts, we know how it feels. So when our neighbor is acting strange and is not coping with things, we are able to forgive because we can relate to that because the wounds that are hitting us. And New Age is exactly the opposite. New Age is like a atheist psychologist that is counseling a woman that has trouble in her marriage. And then the answer of the psychologist is, you were created by God to be happy. You should leave that man, otherwise you will be unhappy all of your life. Leave him. Just go away and find another man that will make you happy. For sure God has a better choice in your life. And then that psychologist will destroy that sacrament. She will not be interested, or that psychologist will not be interested in building up that marriage, and she will not be interested in teaching the patient for forgiveness or anything, or reconciliation of any kind. She will only talk to this patient to be happy, to find happiness, to find freedom in life. So everything that is an obstacle in your life, you should get ready of, because that is the calling of New Age. New Age is about glorifying yourself. It's about building up yourself. It's about finding your own freedom and your own way of doing things. Thus, that independence is exactly the flag of New Age, independence. And the more we look at it, the more we find so many sources of New Age. Imagine that ecology, most of the ecological movements of today are New Age. You notice that sometimes all of these ecologist movements come to a country in the third world. Let's say I just found something really bad in Argentina. They have beautiful places there on the Pacific side, way down south, close to the Patagonia. And then these institutions that are just big-time corporations, they came down and made sure that the UN declare a whole area as a humanities patrimony, like something that belongs to humanity. I forgot the terms they used, but anyways, they took over all of the land and no one can touch it. See, there are areas of there that are precious, and it's right that they don't let anybody build anything there and should preserve them like that. But there are hundreds of miles that there's nothing special there, and they are not to be touched. Then why is this happening? Because what they're doing, the superpowers, they're preserving those lands for the future of their countries, the future of the power. They don't let people consume the natural reserves that are there. See, and they're taking over big pieces of land for their own benefit. And those are big corporations that come around and take over. See, nobody sold them that. Nobody offered it to them. But they come in as a big world organization and say, all these lands should be preserved because it belongs to humanity. And then if the governments fight against that, that means you are going against what belongs to humanity. And then you are not aware and concerned about ecology. You are not to protect the planet. So you have these big important masons going around the world preaching about the global warming and also preaching about how overpopulated Earth is. That couldn't be, that has to be the biggest lie ever. Any one of you that has traveled and crossed the oceans and crossed many places on Earth, you know that there is so much land untouched on Earth that is rich with all kinds of natural reserves all around the world. Nobody could ever fool us telling us the world is overpopulated. What is overpopulated is the cities. You see, the cities are overpopulated because these systems, these economical systems and private powers, they brought masses of people into the cities and keeps them in debt. You see, they have debts that last 30 years, 40 years to pay a home. They are engaged in horrible debts for years. They are not able to go anywhere. If they go anywhere, they lose everything they have. They have to work there. And apparently that's beneficial. Because you can say if they don't do that, they will be hungry somewhere. They will not be able to survive. That's not necessarily the truth. But part of the New Age movement is the globalization. See, one day we end up with one world order, one world currency, and then we will not have a religion. See, there is a man in the US called Ted Turner that was the one that came up with CNN News. He sold that to Warner Brothers, half of it, and then when he made that deal, that were billions of dollars, he donated $2 billion to the UN. And he's a Mason, right? The condition of those $2 billion, it's a gigantic donation, is that they will put together a world church. So what they're doing is for the year 2015, we are going to have a world church. A church with no Bible, no doctrine, a church with no God, a church of people. So what they're going to do is in every capital of the world, of every country, is going to have that church, and it's going to be connected, and through the web. And then every Sunday they're going to have a service, and it's going to be connected worldwide. So those that join that church are going to be benefited with jobs, and they're going to have amazing works of charity, feeding the poor, bringing housing to the poor, and doing great works of social work. And then everyone that joins becomes part of that power. And then they're going to prove that the origin of all wars and the origin of all misery on earth is religions. See? So that's the way they take religion out of the heart of society. And that's part of New Age. There's so much New Age going on because of the times. And what is the reason? What is the reason for this? You see, the closer we get to the second coming of Jesus, the tougher the battle. And the devil is going to come up with more and more sophisticated ways of enslaving us. The world has never been more enchanting than today, more seducing. And Satan has all the toys out, all the cards on the table, because he's a gambler. And he's putting it all out to get us so busy that we are 24 hours a day focused on this earthly life, and that way he steals from us the graces of eternal life, and that's what he's doing. So therefore all these movements of New Age, what they do is they focus people on temporary powers and on temporary benefits. Because if you know why people go to a witch, why do they have card reading, palm reading, spiritualists and talking to spirits, and all of these numerologies and astrologies and all these crystals and candles and all this flower therapy and flora therapy and these therapies of all kinds. Why do people get involved with that? The only reason people get involved with that is for plain temporary benefits. Imagine this. You probably know that you all have, because of your order, a very close relationship with India, and I'm sure probably many of you have been there. I don't know how many of you are from there, but the thing is, you know about Hinduism, and you know about yoga, see? And you know Hatha yoga is the first yoga, the ground yoga. And in the West, people are so ignorant about pagan religions and Eastern philosophies that they think Hatha yoga is just an exercise, see? And then when you know yoga, and you know there are 7 yogas, and Hatha yoga is the ground yoga, you know that yoga is a worshiping, is a body language worshiping to deities, gods, right? There is a god for every pose of yoga, right? There is a god, and they have the statue for everyone. They worship them. So when they do Hatha yoga, they are worshiping all those gods, see? And they do this for an hour, I don't know how long. So in the West, people are so ignorant about the East that they use that as exercise, and they benefit themselves because they turn like cats, right? Stressed out. I practiced that for 14 years in California. When I was an actor, a musician, in order to be in shape, I was practicing Hatha yoga at high degrees of temperature, sweating my life away, and I was so elastic, I was like a cat, right? And all because of Hatha yoga, right? I had no idea I was worshiping false gods. I was worshiping deities, and then later on when I converted and I understood what it meant, that it was an abomination for me as a Catholic to tap into false gods and worship them, then I began to talk about that, and I got all kinds of enemies in the church. There were priests, practicing nuns, all kinds of Catholics, very distinguished Catholics, so they hated me. Fortunately, the church already came out with a document, explaining why we should never practice it. And it's very simple, I give you an example. In the book of the Maccabees, there is a passage of Judas Maccabee. He was wondering why his soldier has lost the last war, because they were always protected by God. They will win all the battles. They will defeat the enemy always. They were all a prayerful army. They were in prayer. They were faithful Jews. They were faithful to God. And that battle they lost. So Judas was very curious about it and went to see his dead soldiers. And when he opened up their uniforms, they had amulets around their necks. So what happened is in the last war they won, they took the amulets out of the dead soldiers they killed and put them on for good luck. See? So what the good luck they got is that God didn't bless them, and then the next battle they were all killed. See, that's one of the biggest signs of the systems of purgatory that the church uses, because Judas Maccabee immediately went collecting money to send to Israel, for them to Jerusalem, for them to pray for the dead, for the salvation of the dead. So that's one of the biggest shows of the existence of purgatory that was in the soul of a Jew, that was a good Jew, a holy Jew, that God was with him always. And this is an example of what an abomination is. We should never, you see, we have a very jealous God. We can never touch anything that comes from a foreign God. As simple as that. Never. So New Age is about inviting us to join all kinds of gods and cultures, and not to think much of that. We are all brothers and sisters. We all belong together. So we can hold hands and share our religions and our cultures as one. That is a lie. We could never do that. You see, that's why Jesus came and said, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. Mother against children and this and the other. People were in awe. Say, how could God do that? But it's very simple. If we are to obey God, a lot of people are not going to like us. See, because if I'm going to live on God's law, I necessarily going to have enemies. Necessarily. A lot of people are not going to agree with me. See, sometimes I go to funerals because I try to find my mass everywhere I go. So I go to funerals and someone is there in a coffin and they bring all this, presentation of the life of this person that they are burying. And then one of the relatives goes up and said, my aunt was the greatest woman. She never had problems with anybody. She got along with everyone. She was so holy. And then I'm thinking inside, I say, how holy could you be when you get along with everyone? See, that they bury in a hypocrite, right? Because you notice the holiest people in the world, your own founder, John Paul II, they had enemies everywhere. People that hated them, right? Because they don't like what they think about. They don't like they protect life. All the abortion movements, pro-abortion, they hate people that protect life, right? You will have enemies everywhere. When you testify in behalf of God, people come against you. So how could you die without having problems with anybody and getting along with everyone? That is an example of what New Age is about. New Age is about political correctness. See, going about being friends with everyone. Sometimes I find in the church, in the Catholic Church, charismatic groups. I preach to a lot of them, and a lot of them are very holy and gifted, but some of them are really lost. What they do is they go together with Protestants, and they go into worshiping together God. And then when they are with them, they tell everyone, don't talk about the Virgin Mary, don't say anything about the Eucharist, don't talk about this and the other, and they close down all the gifts of the church because they are with Protestants. So we are going to hold hands and be like them. Then what they do is they turn the Catholic Church into another Christian denomination. See, that is the absolute opposite of ecumenism. Ecumenism is a dialogue between Christian believers. But the dialogue was set up by the Second Council in order to invite all of those Christians that have been gone from the Mother Church, to invite them back to the Mother Church. That's the real sense of ecumenism. It's not that we are to get together with all the Protestants and then be one with them and make sure we don't offend them. Let's don't talk about Mary and let's don't talk about the sacraments or nothing like that, because that will scare them. See? Because that will be exactly a sign of New Age. That's what New Age is about. Let's all get along. Let's all of us get along. And then in spite of everything, that's why the European Union is trying to get with all the countries, They are taking down all the cultural idiosyncrasies, everything, and turning them into one thing. And then religion is not to be discussed publicly anywhere. No one should wear any religious garments anywhere. And they are getting to that. In France, what they did? And apparently they're doing that to stop the Muslims from doing this and the other. No, what they're trying to do is to stop religion and then stop God in people's life. That's what they're doing. So it's a very subliminal force. So every door we open into the dark becomes a window where the devil comes in, and that's exactly what New Age is about. So if you want to know how free you are of New Age, you have to know how faithful you are to sacred traditions, sane doctrine, and church hierarchy. See, the only way to be free of New Age is if you are in line with the church. In line with the church. It's the only way you could navigate these waters without being touched by that. The Hebrews that were taken into the Exodus by Moses, they were there for 430 years as a chastisement of God. And then many generations were born in Egypt. So they had an Egyptian culture, though they had Hebrew blood. So when God took them out of Egypt and got them through the desert, one of the main lessons they had to learn, they had to exorcise themselves from the Egyptian culture. And you notice that every time Moses was taking a little long, they will turn to worship, all kinds of false gods, because they had that culture. They were not Egyptians, but they were born there. So that's exactly what we are on earth. We are in Egypt, and then God is teaching us not to worship anything of the earth, not to worship nature, not to worship any power of the earth. And then every time we go to worship self, worship money, worship any human power, worship anything of earth, then God comes in and says, this is not what you have to. And then that's how the Spirit of God comes after us. This is the teaching. We are to set ourselves free from idolatry. We are to set ourselves free from worshiping creation. You notice how sometimes we worship people and we don't even know it? Sometimes for us to be peaceful, joyful, and content in general, people have to love us. See, we have to be appreciated by others. We have to be acknowledged by others. We have to be able to control others. And then we are peaceful and sort of happy. That is idolatry, right? Because what we're doing is we're depending on people to be happy. We're depending on people to be peaceful. So we are not depending on God to be happy and peaceful. Our peace and our joy do not come from God, comes from human beings. Therefore, we are worshiping people. Therefore, we are idolaters. And then our life is like a roller coaster. Because the day they love us, we smile. When they reject us, we hate. Right? We are angry. So that is idolatry. So that's why if we want to make sure how free we are from idolatry, we have to understand how much we do depend on people to be content. See, if people really have so much power over you, that's how much idolatry you have in your heart. No human being should be able to take your peace away. No human being. Anytime you let a human being take your peace away for whatever action is taking place, you have adored that person. You just worship that person. That's what it is. It's pure idolatry. So you can never give power to people. You can never give power to nature. You can only give power to God. God should be your ruler. God should be your source of joy. God should be your source of peace. God should be your source of contemplation, where you will acknowledge your life and realize the economy of your soul that can only come from God. Could not come from a human being. Could not come from you. So to be free of New Age, you have to make sure you are free of idolatry. And idolatry permeates us in many levels, many levels. Sometimes we are so attached to our own little habits. We have habits that we develop, and those habits become idolatry because we worship them. You know, some people have to have certain things at certain time every day, and if they don't have them, they are miserable. So it's the same thing. They are worshiping those little habits. So that's another source, another level of idolatry. The same thing. You should never be attached to anything that controls you. You should never let yourself be controlled by anything. You notice that is our animal side. You notice how a dog, before laying down, sometimes they go around like a few times and then they lay down. See, we do the same, but we don't have to go around physically, but we do it mentally. You go into a place and then your mind goes around looking for the place where you're going to sit, just like the dog going, ooh, and then you go and sit wherever your mind settles, right? And it's an animal movement, but ours is more sophisticated because we have reason. So the dog doesn't have that. So the poor dog has to do it physically, going around like this. We have a mind, so we do it mentally, but we're doing faster rounds than the dog. We're going like this, really fast. And so if we are aware of that, then we know how easily we are attached to our habits because we are really fast. And we can be dependent on many things, and then all those things are levels of idolatry. And that's all of that is part of New Age. All of that is part of New Age because those are all windows of the dark. See, you notice how someone is so eager about everything they do and the way they do it that if they put this book here like this, they always put it there, and someone dares to come and move it here, then you go like this, you are lost. You're already thinking, I know who did it, right? And you go into all kinds of sinful, thoughts, and then you end up having a problem because you gave so much power to the way you put this book here, that you're already worshiping this. You're already dependent of this, right? And that's how slavery comes in. That's how we become a slave of our natural ways. And then God is teaching us to set ourselves free from every attachment. We have to let go, completely let go of all these things. And the freedom that we find, the more we let go, the lighter the soul, the lighter the heart, the more joy and peace, obviously. Because we are not attached to these little habits and all these things that control us. And there are two monsters in our conduct, human conduct. One is wanting to control, and the other one is wanting approval. Those two are two monsters, two demons. See, if you do what you do, and you do that because you want to control, then you are outside the spirit. And if you do what you do, and all you do is because you want approval, you are outside the spirit of love. You are just ruling yourself, your little life. And that makes you a slave, that turns you into a slave. Because you are depending on being approved, or you're depending on controlling people, controlling life, controlling situations. When you're not able to control or to get approval, you are angry. You're frustrated, you are depressed, you're confused, everything is stuck, you don't flow. You feel bad. You can't even get sick. So that's why we have to find our freedom and let go of those chains. That's the only way we could be free, if we let go of all these little habits, all of that. And obviously, when we talk about this, and the way I'm talking, you say, who is going to be saved then? Like the apostle said. But the thing is, we are really working towards perfection. Imagine if we sit here to do and preach the rules of mediocrity. Say, try as hard as you can. Try to get better. You will get better. Try. Don't be too hard on yourself. A lot of people say, he's so kind, has so much love and compassion, right? And they love that preaching. A lot of people love that. But when you come and speak about true perfection, how to get rid of all this evil, then a lot of people don't like it. They say, oh man, who's going to be saved? This is too much. How could we get there? Say, well, the thing is, we will never make it on our own. We know that. Never. But the thing is, God came along with Jesus to complete us. Jesus is completeness. So Jesus is redemption. Redemption means He will give us what we are missing. He will join us in the work. You know, one of the most beautiful things that the Lord taught me about myself was when I became a missionary. And I was begging the Lord to help me because I was so confused. You know how it is that the closer you get to God, the most unworthy you feel about everything. Say, why, and I'm sure all of you go through this, why was I chosen by you to be a nun and be your servant, Lord, when I'm such a miserable one, such a sinner? And then same thing happens to me. I say, me, the worst one that persecuted you, that made fun of you and persecuted Christians, and now I am a missionary of your church. Help me, have mercy on me. And then the Lord showed me this. He said, as long as you make sure that you do renounce to sin with all your heart, all your mind, all your being, even though you're not going to be able to overcome it on your own, the day you truly renounce to it, it will disappear from my presence, though you will fall back and forth into that weakness for the rest of your life. But that weakness is going to purify you because it's going to be your biggest torment. See, the more fear of God we have, the more sin torments us. It's like Saint Gemma of Galgani. I'm sure you probably know her. She was being tempted with impurity by Satan greatly, and she suffered all night long. And then when that was gone, and Jesus appeared to her, she said, "Where were you all night? Look at what I've been through." And he said to her, "Who do you think was making you hate the temptation? Who do you think? I was in you, getting you to hate that. And that's why you are closer to me today." And then that is the truth. We have to understand that once we renounce to our weaknesses and give them up truly, doesn't mean we are overcoming them and we're never going to fall back into that. And Satan is not going to trip us. Yes, but as long as we despise them, as long as we abhor them, as long as we are tormented by that weakness, it doesn't appear before God at all. The day we die, though we had that weakness all of our life, the day we die, we come before His tribunal. Before Him, that weakness is gone a long time ago. Because God knew that all we wanted was to overcome that weakness. That's all we wanted. So we got it. That's mercy and compassion. That is God. God is a good God. I give you a very plain human example to that. Parallel. You have a son, and the son is going to school. He studies really hard, but he's not very bright, And then the day of a very, very important exam, the father sees the son all night up, working hard, doing all he can. He goes to school and fails, doesn't pass the grade. Comes back home, and for that good parent, he says to the son, "Son, for me, you made the grade, though you didn't make it for them. But for me, don't worry, you made it, because you gave everything you had. So it means to me that you made it, and that should suffice you. Even if they didn't give you the grade, I give it to you." And this is God. God is that. The world will punish us. When we are found guilty on human law, they sent us to prison. They sentence us. But when we are found guilty before God's tribunal, He saves us and rescues us. That's the difference between the two justices. And we have to understand that this is the calling of freedom. So that's why the devil is laying out all these incredible games that are called New Age. All these games. And they come in. I have seen whole communities, religious communities, go down because they let New Age come into the convents. They begin with enneagrams, all kinds of numerologies, all kinds of mental techniques and all kinds of technologies and all kinds of things that will pervert the convents, and they will become so intelligent, so bright, so aware, so up to date, that they will destroy the convent, because the spirit of division comes in, pride comes in, human intelligence and talents bloom the wrong direction, and all of this destroys the religious life. The prayer life goes down, love goes down, compassion goes down, pride comes up. And then the vocations are over, God will not bless them, and at the end, the whole community falls apart. I've seen that time and time again. One time I was in Toronto about 9 years ago, and I went to this sister to a convent for a retreat. I wasn't giving a retreat to a sister, but they rent out the place for retreats. And I went there with a group of lay people, and I gave a 3-day retreat on a weekend. And then as I was walking through the convent grounds, I began to see all these circles of fire, crystals, all kinds of symbology that from New Age. And then I talked to the nun, the Mother Superior, and I said, why are you involved with all of this? Don't you know that all of this comes from the devil? All of this is New Age. And she said, oh son, I read your story, and I know you just came into the church. You have a long way to go before you know what I know. Say, I know best. I have been a nun for 37 years in this community. That's why I'm Mother Superior today. And all of these are gifts of God. Say, imagine that. I was going like, whoa. See, who could talk to her? I was going, Mother, I respect what you do, but I do not agree with it, and I think this is from the devil. I hope you get rid of that, because otherwise this convent is going to go down. And I asked her, how many new vocations do you have in the last 5 years? And then she was silent. She walked away. I realized there were only 5 nuns, and they had, I don't know how many people working for them, because they turned that place into a great retreat place for Muslims, for Buddhists, for all kinds of people who were going to retreats there. And then I didn't know that but I found out later. So I came back 2 years later to the same area, but we went to a retreat somewhere else. And I asked the lady that put together those retreats about that convent. And she said that convent went down all the way. Mother Superior died of cancer not very soon after I was there. And then the other ones, they sold the place, and each one of them had a condominium, and they live independent from one another, each one on their own apartment. That was the end of the convent, So, and those things are because of this source of evil. People are not aware of the great damage that this brings in, because God absolutely despises that. That is an abomination. There is nothing that God hates more than you bringing in anything from foreign gods. Anything that has to do with magic, divination, superstitions, natural powers, natural healings, things like that. All of that comes from the dark. And then most of it is apparently beneficial. And that word is so dangerous. It's like St. Paul says, everything is licit, but not everything is to my convenience. So we have to understand that. I'm going to ask the Lord for His word, and I'm going to read to you from Romans 12:1. Christian life, be concerned for others. I beg you, dearly beloved, by the mercy of God, to give yourselves as a living and holy sacrifice, pleasing to God. Such is the worship of a rational being. Don't let yourselves be shaped by the world where you live, but rather be transformed through the renewal of your mind. You must discern the will of God, what is good, what pleases, what is perfect. The grace that God has given me allows me to tell each of you, be active, but not indiscreet. Let each one exercise wisely the gifts of faith granted by God. See, the body is one, even if formed by many members, but not all of them with the same function. The same with us. Being many, we are one body in Christ, depending on one another. Let each one of us, therefore, serve according to our different gifts. Are you a prophet? Then give the insights of faith. Let the deacon fulfill his office. Let the teacher teach. Let one who encourages convince. You must likewise give with an open hand, preside with dedication, and be cheerful in your works of charity. The word of the Lord. Amen.